today we have a special guest. We have the famous Greg from the Money team, and of course, Quinton. Hi,
Hey,
Greg.
Shreya. Hey, thanks for having me.
Can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Greg. I'm one of the product managers here at Databricks. I work with the Money team, which is our fun name for the team internally that handles a lot of things related to billing, cost management, observability of usage and what's happening. And so I spend a lot of time working on features that help customers understand what's going on with Databricks, their instance of it, how usage is going, the health of things, etc.
That's it's very, very interesting. And I think observability and finops are very important topic. And can you like walk us through like the evolution of the this observability, let's say, journey that started, I think, 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. This is an exciting area. And what I tend to see is that for customers, as they spend more money, it becomes more important to have observability and put FinOps best practices in place. When you start off, you're maybe exploring some data sets, trying out the product. You often don't see as much focus on that. There's more focus on sort of using the product and does this meet my needs and is it fast? But over time, as things scale and you start to have tens or hundreds or thousands of data workers and a lot of data being managed, you want to understand, what am I spending money on? Is it effective? And so we see a lot of that, as customers ramp up and grow. And over the last couple of years, we've been investing a lot to make sure that we have the information they need ready for them. We took a data first approach. Not a big surprise. We're a data company. And so the first thing we said is let's make it really easy to get data about what you're using. And we built system tables, which was a great way to use sort of native within Databricks and get access to data. We've seen a lot of people do cool things off of that, whether it's plug it into existing tools or dashboards they had, use it, natively at Databricks or integrate that data with information from their cloud provider or other sources. We've then started investing in tooling to make it easier and kind of a little less do it yourself. Say, hey, let's let you just go ahead and do these common scenarios you want to do, like set up a budget alert or drill down into dashboards. And then we've been continuing to invest in a number of things. This year, we've spent a lot of time helping folks drill down to kind of more granular aspects of their spending. What started as, hey, I want to see my high level spend, then turned into, well, I want to break it down by team. I have a few different projects or teams, and I want to see the spend. And then that next level of granularity is actually, I want to see the individual things happening, the job runs or the queries, and I want to understand those, because that tends to be where you can actually take action and make a change and optimize something or coach a data worker on like how to better use the partitions that are available so they're not scanning so much data and the query is faster. So we've really kind of gone from that high level to much more granular. We've made a lot of progress there over this last year, which has been exciting.
Yeah, and I remember like for system tables before we used to have, I think was called audit logs that you needed like to activate this, then have like a bunch of JSON files that you had to like parse and then make them available in a table. Now it's super easy. You just go and enable system tables. You can have a bunch of schemas, including the one on the billing, the usage. And then you can like build a lot of dashboards. And I've seen like for the last maybe 6 months, we did accelerate a lot in this FinOps part. Like by like releasing stuff on tracking cost first for serverless. Then we added model survey, like everything, like talking about workflows, notebooks, then model serving. We are adding more and more, and also like some of the on pre-built dashboards. So are we planning like to focus more on bringing in more dashboards or like enhancing the existing ones? Or
Yeah. So we've definitely taken an approach where we've said every product on Databricks should be easy for customers to understand their cost and their spending, to put tags in place so they can do cost attribution and see like which spend is happening by which team. Now we've expanded a lot as a company. Even in the few years since I've been here, we've gone from a couple products to a lot more and individual features. And part of allowing customers to understand their spend is doing it consistently. it doesn't you no good if you can understand half your spend, but you can't understand the other half. And so part of what we've been doing is trying to kind of raise the floor on all products in terms of the finops that's available, and make sure that they can put tagging in place, they can see that spend, that it shows up in those cost dashboards. And so a lot of things have happened on the AI ML space, serverless products to help that. There's also been a lot happening on some of our more classic products. The Lakeflow team has done a lot to release more data on jobs and job runs, and letting people see detail. The SQL team has done a lot with queries, the query history table, letting you see individual queries and how long they take. See the warehouses and information about them. And so that really lets you drill in a bit further. We still have some products that have a little bit of catching up to do, but we're getting to that point where they're going to catch up. And then all new products we release in the future will really have a certain bar they have to meet. And so that's one of the things our team is trying to do, is build a platform that makes it easy for when a new product is built, it can launch with all that cost management built in. So there's not sort of that wait to say, well, when is this stuff going to come? It's just kind of out of the box on day one. And that's part of our maturing journey as a company. You start off as a company and you build a great product and you're really excited people are using it. And then they start saying like, hey, I want to see where I'm spending. Eventually you get to the point where you're like, cool, this stuff is all built in. As we launch features, there's checkboxes for all the types of things. Certainly FinOps, certainly security, network and compliance type things, regional availability, all those things start to become standard as you mature in a company. And we've been doing that over the last few years here at Databricks.
Yeah, and I think you have access as an account admin, you can get out of the box dashboard from the account UI. And I'm going to add like a shameless plug, but on top of that, you can also install all the DB demo system tables that we have. And we try to, so it's more like community driven. But we have a lot of dashboards on everything, warehouse, model SQL, model serving endpoint, and you can really go into the details and see, which workspace is consuming what, and you can zoom in and get really a lot of information. So we try to pre-bake all these dashboards within the DB demo system table one. So like it's also super useful.
And just before like Quentin asked the question, in case you want to use the dashboard, you mentioned like the budget, like the budget tracking, you need to make sure that you enable system tables, activate them, and maybe refresh like the schemas maybe every quarter to have the latest tables which are used to feed the dashboard that you're gonna be using.
Yeah, absolutely. The good news is our GA tables, the billing tables, are automatically enabled, and so kind of no need for that refresh there. But we do have a number of tables in preview that you can enable and make sure you have all the latest things, so you can use some of those dashboards. The community-driven thing I think is really important. We took this approach of let's give customers data about what's happening. Let's give them some sample queries and kind of see what they can do with it. And it wasn't just customers, it was customers and it was internal teams and, partnership on that. And people have published blog posts and some Databricks partners have built things on top of system tables. And we like that because you're going to have more innovation. You're going to have cool things come out of that rather than us just saying, here's like one report we built and there's a chart and you can't do anything with it. That data first approach gives you some more openness. Now, the challenge of that is there's a bunch of these dashboards floating around and you have one that does this and one that does that, and there's some questions about it. And so balancing those two things is something we've been thinking about. How do we make sure we give people an official blessed dashboard where they can trust the numbers, but also give them access to some of this sort of like community driven stuff? And it's something I've been noodling on because in the area of observability, there's just always going to be new ways to think about things and ask things, and we don't want to limit that. But at the same time, if it's too spread out, there's questions about like, hey, these numbers don't match, or what does this one mean, or which one of these should I use? And so I think there is a balance between those things. And I suspect that's an area we'll be talking more about in the future.
So maybe what advice would you share with someone who want to implement best practices? I feel like there is a notion of observability, so you want to know what's going on, but potentially also you want to put, budget in place, alerts. Like what's the best practices you would recommend to a new user?
Often what I see happen with customers is they start off using Databricks at a small scale, and then they're really excited about the product and the features, and things grow and they add more users. And then they sort of have a whoa moment where they realize they're kind of spending a little more money than they thought, or they have a question from their CFO or something about like, hey, tell me how much this team spent. And then all of a sudden they realize like, okay, I need to like break down the spend, and I have 3 different projects and I need to understand which is, how much is being spent on this or that project. Some companies get there pretty quickly. Some take a little while to ramp up and get there, but I feel like everyone kind of has that moment. And if you wait until that moment to think about cost stuff, you're sort of too late. Now you have all this usage that maybe is intertangled and it's hard to understand. And so what I always recommend is, as people get started, to organize Databricks in a way that'll make it easy in the future. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is by setting up different workspaces and kind of isolating teams. And so you have things divided. All the system tables have workspace ID as a column. And so it's easy to split things that way. Another you can do is set up different shared compute resources. If you have people on all-purpose compute, for example, have one team kind of sharing that cluster, and then you'll know all the spend on it for that team. Now, another thing you can do is set up tagging, and you can use the same tags across different things. You can tag on workspaces or warehouses or clusters, and more and more features are adding places where you can add tags, and that will let you then just be able to say, well, I want to see the sum of costs for this tag, and now you can see it across everything. So usually it's a combination of those things, and it's hard for me to say one way to do it because every company is different in how they organize themselves and how they want to break down costs. But it's usually a combination of those. And if you set that up in your early days, you're going to have a much better time down the road when you want to break down your costs because everything is segmented out. It's also almost impossible to tag too much. Like, it can become a bit of an overhead if you have a lot of things and it's a little confusing. But like, if you have too many tags, you can always ignore one of them in the query later and do the reporting. But if you don't have enough tags, you're out of luck. You have no way of splitting things, or you have to, try to figure something out after the fact. And so putting some tags in place at the beginning is great. If you decide later you don't like those tags, you can always add new ones and just kind of like start ignoring those. And so, yeah, that's always day one. Get started by putting a little bit of organization in place in sort of a logical way. And most people are familiar with this because if they're using other tools, if they're using a cloud provider, they've set up this stuff. I think it's just realizing, hey, I should do this on Databricks as well.
And I remember like what I was sharing with my customers, and thanks to the feature like released budget policies, a lot of things like was much easier because I remember in the past I used to push them to use cluster policies. And by team, why? Because like the tagging was enforced automatically. Like if you are part of data engineering team, then you'll have, whenever you create a cluster, it's going to be tagged, team data engineering. Same thing, data analyst, ML team. And then with the serverless offering, with the budget policies, you can do the same thing. If this person is using serverless notebooks, the cost will be associated to data engineering team. If it's workflows, same thing. And model serving as well. And I think, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but DBC like SQL warehouses, this is something that will come a little bit later, which means all the resources are now tagged. And then you can just go and deploy the dashboard to track the consumption. And you can also use the alerts that your team also released, like just select the alerts. Maybe the guys behind the finops put a budget, and if they are above the threshold, they will receive an alert. And this is super cool. And I think this is something you're planning to demo maybe for us.
Yeah, I can show that off. Definitely, we can hop into a demo. But I think you're right. That's being able to put those tags on everything. So the budget policies, which allows the tagging, and it does it in a different way, which is kind of interesting. Some of our Databricks products that have been around a while use shared compute, and you would tag the compute. And so you kind of had a limit to the granularity you could tag at. And you would have to say like, oh, I want another cluster if I want to have a different tag. As we're building serverless, we sort of get to think about things again and say, hey, how would we want to do this now? And one of the things we've done is we've made it so that everything that kicks off basically an execution on serverless can be individually tagged, and it's individually reported in the usage records. And so that gives you a much finer grained thing to operate on. And you can actually have 50 people, each with a different tag. Whereas before, those 50 people might have been on the same cluster, and so it had the same tag. So it's much easier to break it up into smaller things and then group them later. And so we do see people doing that, where they'll put that policy in place. They'll tag people based on their team or something, and then they'll maybe join that with an org chart table that they've imported and say, okay, now we can group it by team or by project that they're on. Or they can set up some of those tags by putting users in groups with those projects if it's relatively fixed. And so this is an area where I'd say we're able to do more on serverless because we're kind of building fresh and restarting, whereas doing some of that on Classic would take a lot of rework, and it's really hard to change some of those things once you've made some of those decisions. And so it is exciting to see how fine-grained you can get on newer things, whether it's model serving, whether it's serverless, interactive, etc. So let's see. I'm happy to do a demo. How do I share my screen here? Let's see.
And I have one more question for you, because I've seen we are currently like building more dashboards. I've seen the one on the workflows. And are we intending at the end, and also the one on DB SQL, are we intending to share or have one, let's say, dashboard with multi pages where we're going to have all this observability stuff, or we're still going to maybe try to unify them, or what's the goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we built the cost dashboard, which is sort of the Databricks blessed, here's the best way to think about looking at your costs, we said, let's start with the high level spend. And so we have here, you can see your spend over time. We're looking at month, and we have it by certain product line categories, whether it's jobs or DLT, etc. And then we let customers start drilling down. I mentioned previously tagging was important because you wanted to see team spend. And so you can look and say, okay, I have a couple different teams. How much is each of those teams spending over time? And then we went a step further into when we have various metadata on them, you can drill in endpoint name for the things that have it, which not everything is an endpoint, because obviously stuff that's jobs isn't an endpoint and won't have an endpoint name. But for the endpoints, you could start to see that. One of the next things that came up as well, for SQL specifically, I want to drill down and look at this. And for Lakeflow, I want to drill down and look at this stuff. And the products are a little different, so the questions that you ask are a little different. And the way we've been doing that is each of those product teams is investing in answering the core questions. And I've been working with the PMs and engineers on each of those teams to say, okay, when you're answering those questions, let's make sure there's a natural flow from the centralized cost dashboard that shows you your overall spend down to what you're showing, so you can kind of drill down. And then the logical way would be to group those together. Now, the great news is, as we build these dashboards, the AI/BI team has been building a lot of things, the ability to have kind of more complex dashboards, have tabs, etc. And so that's one of the angles we're exploring is, could this just be you start at the center, and then when you want to drill down further, we have multiple tabs or a separate tab over there. We've been discussing other options as well. We're continuing to explore what is the right way to get this data to customers. Is it a native AI/BI dashboard that we've sort of pre-installed? Is it something that's embedded that they can just see and use? And so there's a couple different methods to it. But we always like hearing what customers are using. And part of the benefit of launching these kind of specific dashboards for each product is we get to really get that customer validation and make sure that one answers their questions, and then we can figure out how to pull it into the fold. And so there's a little bit, I mentioned earlier, this notion of community driven. We see a lot of people doing development, and then we want to take the best ideas and sort of make them the gold standard. And so some of that is even development happening within Databricks. We want that team to go be able to experiment and feel free to iterate quickly and learn. And then once they've really nailed it, we can say, great, now let's make that a part of the gold standard. So that's an area that we'll definitely be having some more announcements soon in.
That's great. Yeah, and Greg, I know a lot of folks don't know about the policy they can do and the tagging they can add on the policy. Is that something you can show us? Do you have that available?
Let's look at policies. So policies are a great way to do a number of things in Databricks. Specifically with serverless, you can use a feature we have called budget policies, which helps you with attribution and tagging. So if we go into our workspace settings and compute here, we can see budget policies. So we can create one of these to apply a tag. Let's say we want to call this one money team. And I want everything that we do on the money team to be tagged so that we can, report up to our CFO what we're spending. We can go, so this is going to be key value pairs. So we could do budget and then money team as our tag. And then when I use something and I'm using this policy, that tag is going to apply. So we're going to create it. That is now live. And what we are going to do is I am a manager. We're going to create a new notebook, and we are going to make sure I am using serverless compute. So I am set up. Now, in this case, I only have one policy assigned to myself, and so it is going to default to using that policy. In the case that there were multiple policies for me, such as if I worked on 2 different projects and needed to periodically assign the cost, I could switch between them. In this case, I am going to be using that policy by default. There we go. Perfect. Budget policy, money team, and then we're going to tag with money team. So all this cost usage is going to get tagged there. So that's where we can see it. If we had multiple, we can switch between them. In this case, we have some tests that I'm not actually, or maybe they're assigned to everyone. And so that's why. Now that information, that tagging information is going to flow all the way through to system tables. And so you can, run queries on that. You can group by it. And so you have those tags to do various things. Our AIBI cost dashboard utilizes those tags. So you can break down costs by spend easily. And then you can also set up budget alerts using those tags. And so there's a number of ways to set up budget alerts, but tagging is one of the great ones. And so now I could set up a budget alert for the money team spend. And I could say, go over here. I'm going to switch the tab I'm sharing to our budget alerts feature. And so now I'm an account admin. I've set up some budgets of how much I want to spend. I could add a new one for the money team and say, I want to make sure the money team doesn't spend more than $5,000 a month. I'm actually going to set that off of the budget money team. Now I haven't actually used that, so I don't think it's going to pre-populate for me here. But now I've set up a budget and I could say, let's have that alert go to our team. I can put our alias at Databricks.com. I'm not actually going to type our team alias in here. I don't want everyone emailing us. And then we could go ahead and create that. I have one value specified. Let's see. There we go. And now we've got a budget set up. So it's going to start pulling in data. Now I just created this one. There's nothing on it. Eventually what we're going to be able to do is we're going to have 2 things. We're going to have this burn down chart where we can see for what our team was configured to spend, how our spending is going over time for the month. And then when it crosses that, it's going to email a team and let us know we've gone over budget. And so we can set up various alerts, and that'll make sure even if we get very busy with our work and we're not paying attention, we can, be notified, hey. And so one of the things, a lot of applications that teams rely on for communication can let you create an email alias. And so you could create a Slack room email alias and then use that as what the budget alert goes to, and then just go ahead and have your team. You can also do various integrations where you set off like a pager duty or something to your team based on those alerts. So I've seen a lot of people do things like that using those email aliases to basically trigger a workflow and have people log in and say, okay, what's going on? Why did my spend go over? Is it like this, where we're just sort of spending a little more than expected every day? Or is it more like a case where there was a dramatic spike one day and we need to pay attention to that? We periodically see things like that where, you have a dramatic spike in spend. We set up a fun one on our demo account to be able to show what that would look like. I'm going to switch over to it. Let me get that to load up. And so if we had a case like this, where we had a single day instance, as that happened, we would have those email alerts go out and someone could log in and see, okay, what's going on? This is unexpected. Let's shut some things down and address the issue.
It's amazing. So I think now customers can handle everything right to their cost. You can literally put all the safeguards to make sure that you have a healthy consumption and you're not spending money for the sake of spending money, by understanding the value of each project, by assigning tags. Say, okay, this project costed me maybe $20,000 per month. but this is the business value that's bringing from this specific use case. And you have all the tools available, like other team should like build pre-built dashboards. You can also build your own dashboards. I've seen customers like doing some amazing dashboards, like they were able to track like the tables that are not used, and with Lineage understand the workflow that runs to update those tables, and then maybe see if they can drop those workflows because maybe they are like just ghost workflows running without any value. I've seen like all kind of dashboards, and they can just use system tables as you mentioned, and they can also rely on the existing one.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, the purpose of all this FinOps stuff is to make sure you're aligning your spending with the value you're getting from it. Companies are investing a lot of money in data and AI. They're hiring teams, they're getting all this data, collecting it, storing it, they're setting up Databricks and other tools. And the whole purpose of that is to drive some business value for their company. And the more that they understand that and put the rigor into it, the more they'll be able to match those. I've seen some customers go as far as using sort of a project tracker for each thing they do and making sure they have a tag created with that and understanding the value of that project. Like, this is to make a decision that has this much impact on the business, or this whole workspace runs an application that we collect this much revenue on. And they can actually then tie those things back. And so you see the most mature customers in this really understanding that value, creating tags for the value, using the same tags on the cost, and then you can get to ROI. And so that's definitely the direction we're looking, is how can we help customers do this? Now, we know a lot about the cost information. We don't yet know about all the value information. But as we help organize things by tag, and as those tags correlate with an actual project, we can have those conversations. So we've been advising the Databricks account teams that work with our customers to say, hey, understand kind of the landscape. What are the workloads? What are how do they break it down? What is the value of that project? Now tag that project the same way, and you can track it over time to see, is it okay that that one's going up because the revenue they get from it is also going up? Or is that an area where they expected it to be more fixed cost and we should pay attention when it goes up? And so I think those kind of conversations will get us all to a place of more maturity where really we can make sure that everyone is spending money they're happy with. Because ultimately that's how we are successful. No one's going to be happy if Databricks customers are spending a lot of money and they're not getting any value from it. Eventually they're going to shut down those workloads. And so we want to match those two things as closely as possible. And tagging is a great way to start to connect the dots there.
All right. So we have the budget policies at the workspace level. We can track the budget at the account level, build nice dashboards out of that, to make sure we can track everything, filter by tag, by workspaces based on the organization. What's next? What's the next step?
Yeah, we see more and more companies where they have, a workspace manager that's responsible for a particular team. And today you can go ahead and create a cost dashboard and filter it down and share that with that individual. But it does take some work. And, if you only have 2 of them, okay, you just go set that up. It takes a few minutes. If you have 1,000 different teams and workspace managers, that starts to get more complex. And so one of the areas where we're definitely looking into is how can we make that easier, bring more of that cost information to that workspace admin. And so same information, just sort of like at a different level of the organization, more specific. Now, anytime you do something like that, you want to make sure you're thinking about security, privacy, who's getting the information, who should have it. And then that also depends on the company being set up in Databricks in a way where we can match things to it. So going back to something I shared earlier, you kind of really need to get started and organize your resources in a way to make that possible. But that's one of the next things we're doing. So it's really, you can understand your Databricks costs. How do you get down to the query level? That's an area we've been investing. How do you get the right person to see their specific costs? And now you have an individual responsible for something that can see, understand, and manage that specific thing. We're kind of at a much more fine-grained place where you can operate effectively.
I think if you want to learn more, just make sure to watch Greg's session at the Data and AI Summit in June. And before I think we close, I think we have something I thought about. Who's better than Databricks to monitor Databricks cost? I think this is something you need to meditate and think about it. Anything else to add, Quentin, Greg?
No, thanks for having me. It's always fun talking about this. This is an area that customers care a lot about, and we see a lot of energy going into it. And I'm always trying to enable them to sort of like innovate and solve their business problems, and then figuring out how I could scale that and take sort of the best examples I've seen from customers and make it really easy for every customer to then do it. And so it's always exciting hearing what folks are trying to do. I love connecting with folks that are hands-on with customers. So yeah, keep feedback coming on these things. We try to be very responsive here at Databricks as a product team, and just kind of always be very centered on what the customers are doing, where their pain points are. And so looking forward to developing more great things in the future, and I'll be back hopefully on your show sometime to share some cool updates.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.